In fact, when you talk about the seasons and the way you put it, my favorite quote about that is, you're talking about winter and why live in a place that gets winter when we could live, anywhere. And you say, I would not trade that thrill of spring coming and that awareness of progress, of the fullness of time for the eternal sunshine of a spotless mind in LA. I thought that was beautifully written. And, the whole book is beautifully written, I must say, and for someone who English is not your native language, beautifully done.
Well, it's my major at school, you see.
Well,
did you
you've
write
done
the
very
book
well.
in English or French?
Yes.
You wrote it
No,
in
actually, I don't think I could write it in French.
No.
I've always, I don't know why, even in graduate school we had, these various serious professors from Oxford, and they always told me that, in interpreter school, which is what I attended, you take passages in French, you put them into English, and then you put passengers in English into French. And usually you're always better into your mother tongue. And I was always better in English. And he said, what's wrong with you? And at the time I blamed it. I said, well, I've just spent 1 year in America, and maybe my English was better than the others, but I don't know. I've always had a great love for the English language, which, by the way, is much richer than the French. Because the French is that's why it's so hard to speak it well.
I'm so good about
Because you have a few hundred words of vocabulary in English, and you can converse. And then you don't realize, but it's actually I think it has like 2 or 3 times more words than French. In French, you have only one way of saying, I had fun, and in English you can say I enjoyed myself, I had a good time, I had great fun, and so I always found that richness, and it's like wine. It's like the more you know, the less you know, because then you realize that there's so many words out there. But I've always enjoyed writing and in English, and thank God I don't have to do the French translation, but it would be hard for me.
You said we all have a book in us.
Yes.
How did this book become your book? The first one and now the second. How did you know this was what you were going to write?
The first one was in a way easy because I didn't want to write it. I don't know if you know the story how the title came around. French women don't get fat, but obviously there are fat and overweight women in France like anywhere else. We still have the lowest rate in Europe and in the world except for Japan, but the title came because I was lecturing for Veuve Clicquot all over the U.S. On food and gastronomy and wine, and women would come to me at the end of the talk and say, how come you're so passionate about food and wine, and we see you in magazine, and you entertain a lot, you cook a lot, how come you're not fat? And I couldn't say, been there, done that, And I would give them a French shrug and say, well, French women don't get fat. And then they said, well, what do they do? Well, we have a secret. Oh, you should write a book. And I said, no, I don't want to write a book. And for years I resisted it. And meanwhile, I helped a lot of my friends and a lot of my young colleagues at work. And it always worked. And a friend told me, she's a professor at Berkeley actually, and had spent a year in France when she was young, and she said, Mireille, you really have to write this book. And I said, Leslie, why? I'm not a writer, I don't have the time, blah, blah, blah. And she said, even if you save 5 women's lives, you have to write this book. And that was like it clicked, like, maybe I can make a little difference, And so that's how I got to write that. And of course the second one, it's all your fault, because people who read the first said, I want more stories, I want more recipes, I want more about, lifestyle of the French. Actually, I was trying to say, well, if you've learned in the first book how to manage your relationship with food, I don't need to tell you all the rest, because the French woman applies the same to dressing, to entertaining, to all these aspects. And they said, no, but we want your words. So here it is.
So you did not anticipate what a huge international bestseller this was going to be?
No, I don't think anybody did. And
but how satisfying.
Certainly not, 37 languages.
Yes.
I mean, and even in countries like China, where I was in January, obviously, there are not, many overweight people there, but it's a fascination for the French lifestyle and the French way of, what they've read about, and the literature and the cosmetics or whatever, you know. And so there was a need, you know, and every woman, sometimes I'm afraid to read my emails because it's another request, you know, write more. When is the next book out? And I just finished this, give me a break.
How long does it take you to write? The first book, the second book, did it get easier?
Actually, you know, it's not, you know, I'm not a novelist, so I don't have to struggle for hours about the choice of a word and a phrase. It's people who know me, you know, said, well, when we read your book, it's like when we talk to you, because I write the way I speak, more or less. You know, I mean, obviously, I insert some of my favorite quotes and all that, but it's not difficult, and it's almost cathartic. You know, you just spit it out, and it's fairly rapid. I mean, within 6 months, I go on, and I remember when I wrote the first one, we were in Sicily, in Sardinia, sorry, for 2 weeks vacation, and I said to my husband, I really have to get going because, you know, when I go back with work, it's very difficult, and every morning after breakfast, he'll go to the beach, and the idea was he would come at 1 o'clock to pick me up, and would have lunch and play in the afternoon. And so I had like 4 or 5 hours, and he would come back, and I swear it's like, oh my God, I thought I'd been writing for half an hour, you know, it was 5 hours.
You were meant to write this.
Yeah. And at the end of the week, he said, how is it going? And I said, you want to read what I wrote? He said, sure. He said, you wrote all this week? So it was clear that, you know, he's written books, but, you know, that require research and deep analysis, and it takes 3 years to write a book, but not this. This is like play.